Years passed, and Sylvia's hard work bore fruit. Her triplets, Daniel, David, and Derek, grew into responsible, intelligent young men. Each had inherited their mother's resilience and Grace's values of kindness and perseverance. They excelled in school, often coming home with awards and certificates. Sylvia hung each achievement on the walls of their modest home, her pride growing with every passing year. Daniel, the eldest by a few minutes, had an entrepreneurial spirit. While still in university, he started a small business selling handmade wooden furniture. His designs became popular, and orders poured in from across the region. David, the middle child, pursued law, driven by a desire to fight for justice. He was brilliant in his studies and soon secured a position at a prestigious law firm. His talent and integrity earned him rapid promotions, and he quickly made a name for himself in the legal world. Derek, the youngest, was a tech prodigy. He had a knack for coding and innovation, creating an app during his final year of university that became a global success. Investors scrambled to work with him, and Derek's company became a household name. Though their lives became busy, the brothers never forgot the sacrifices their mother had made. Every milestone they achieved was dedicated to her, and every major decision was made with her happiness in mind. One day, they surprised Sylvia by moving her into a spacious house in a quiet neighborhood. It was nothing like the small home she had shared with Grace. Sylvia marveled at the high ceilings, the lush garden, and the modern kitchen, but what touched her most was the framed photo of Grace they'd placed in the living room. "This is your home now, Mom," Daniel said, hugging her tightly. "And you'll never have to work again," Derek added. David, always the spokesman, smiled and said, "You've done more than enough for us. It's our turn to take care of you." Tears filled Sylvia's eyes as she looked at her three sons, now grown men, standing tall and confident. She had spent years struggling, but this moment made every hardship worth it. Sylvia was sitting on the porch of her new home one sunny afternoon when her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but she answered anyway. "Hello?" "Sylvia," a familiar voice said hesitantly. Sylvia's breath caught in her throat. "Mom?" Her mother's voice broke with emotion. "Yes, my darling. It's me." For a moment, neither could speak. The weight of years of silence hung heavily between them. Finally, her mother spoke again. "I've missed you so much. I've thought about you every single day." Tears streamed down Sylvia's face as she listened. "I've missed you too, Mom. So much." Her mother went on to explain that she had been desperate to reach out earlier but feared her husband's wrath. Now, with her health declining, she couldn't bear the thought of never seeing Sylvia again. "I want you to come home, my love," her mother said. "For Christmas. It's your father's birthday as well. Maybe this time, things will be different." Sylvia hesitated. The idea of returning to the house that had cast her out was daunting. But her mother's voice, frail and pleading, gave her the courage to say yes. After ending the call, Sylvia shared the news with her sons. "I don't know how they'll treat me," she admitted. "But I want to see my mother. And if there's even a small chance to mend things with my father, I have to try." The brothers exchanged glances. "We'll support you, Mom," Daniel said. "And we'll be there for you, no matter what." Sylvia stood in the grand foyer of her new home, staring at the neatly packed suitcase on the floor. Her sons had helped her prepare for this journey, reminding her of the importance of reconciliation, even with a father who had shown her little love. Still, the thought of facing her past filled her with a mix of anxiety and determination. "Are you sure about this, Mom?" Daniel asked, leaning against the doorframe. His voice was laced with concern, his brow furrowed. "Yes," Sylvia replied firmly, smoothing the front of her modest dress. "It's time. Your grandmother wants to see me, and maybe this Christmas will be different." The triplets exchanged uneasy glances. They knew the story of their mother's banishment all too well and had witnessed the scars it left behind. Yet, they respected her decision and wanted to support her, even if they couldn't fully trust the people she was about to meet. "Just remember," David said, walking up to her, "we are only a call away. We'll be there before you know it." Sylvia smiled at her sons, their towering forms a reminder of how much she had achieved despite everything. "I know. And thank you." She had decided to keep her newfound wealth a secret during this trip. Her father and sisters didn't need to know how far she had come. This wasn't about showing off. In keeping with this decision, she instructed her chauffeur to drop her a few blocks from her family home. The sleek black car came to a stop on a quiet street, the mansion she once called home visible in the distance. The driver stepped out to assist her with her luggage, but Sylvia stopped him with a polite smile. "Thank you, but I can manage from here," she said. "Are you sure, Mom? It's quite a walk." "Yes," she insisted gently, gripping the handle of her modest suitcase. "I'll be fine." The driver hesitated but nodded. "As you wish, Mom. Call if you need anything." Sylvia began walking, her heels clicking softly against the pavement. She held her head high, determined not to let the past or her nerves overwhelm her. Her gift for her father, a bottle of the finest old wine, carefully chosen by her sons, was wrapped in plain brown paper. It was deliberate. She wanted the gesture to speak for itself without any appearance of grandeur. As she approached the sprawling mansion, memories came flooding back. She remembered running through the manicured gardens as a child, her father's rare smiles of approval when she aced her exams, and the heavy, painful silence of the day he disowned her. When she stepped through the gates, a burst of laughter reached her ears. The front lawn was decorated with festive lights, and the sound of merriment spilled out from the open windows. Her heart clenched at the familiarity of it all, but she stilled herself and walked to the door. A housemaid answered her knock, her eyes widening slightly in recognition before she quickly composed herself. "Miss Sylvia," she said, stepping aside to let her in. "They're in the dining hall." Sylvia nodded her thanks and stepped inside. The scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon filled the air, mingling with the hum of conversation. She adjusted her grip on her suitcase and the gift bag, feeling the weight of every step as she made her way toward the gathering. When she entered the dining hall, the room fell silent. All eyes turned to her, and for a moment, no one moved. Then, her father's voice broke the tension. "So, you finally decided to crawl back." The words cut through her like ice, but Sylvia kept her composure. "Hello, Father," she said calmly, her voice steady. Her sisters, Clara and Judith, exchanged smirks, their eyes flicking to her plain attire and the brown paper bag she held. "Well, look who decided to join us," Clara said, her tone dripping with mockery. "Still walking everywhere, I see. Or did you hitchhike here?" Judith laughed, adding, "And bringing gifts in paper bags now. How thoughtful." The room erupted in scattered laughter from some of the guests, and Sylvia felt her cheeks flush. Her mother, standing near the table, looked pained but said nothing, clearly unwilling to provoke her husband. Sylvia took a deep breath, refusing to let their words rattle her. "I came to see my family and celebrate Christmas," she said evenly, placing the gift on the table. "This is for Father." Her father scoffed, eyeing the package disdainfully. "If it's as cheap as it looks, you shouldn't have bothered." The humiliation stung, but Sylvia stood her ground. "It's not the price that matters, Father. It's the thought behind it." "Oh, please," Clara interjected, rolling her eyes. "You can't expect him to drink that. He's used to quality, not whatever this is." Judith chimed in, her voice dripping with condescension. "Don't worry, Sylvia. Clara and I brought real gifts. He'll still have something to enjoy." The mockery continued, but Sylvia stayed silent, her resolve unshaken. She knew her sons were only a few hours away, and soon the truth would speak for itself. Sylvia turned away from her sisters, her heart pounding. She knew she shouldn't let their words get to her, but their cruelty cut deeper than she wanted to admit. The sound of her father's booming voice brought her attention to the center of the room. Mr. Henry stood near the fireplace, surrounded by admirers. Dressed in a tailored suit, he looked every bit a proud patriarch. When his eyes landed on Sylvia, his expression darkened. "You've got some nerve showing up here," he said loudly, his voice silencing the room. Sylvia stood her ground. "Mother invited me." "Your mother doesn't run this house," Mr. Henry shot back, his tone sharp. "And you're still the same disappointment you were when you left." A murmur of discomfort rippled through the crowd, but no one dared to intervene. Sylvia's hands trembled, but she refused to lower her gaze. "I came here for family," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "Not for this." Mr. Henry's eyes narrowed. "Then start acting like family. Go help the maids in the kitchen. Maybe that's where you belong." Sylvia stared at him, stunned. Her sisters exchanged smug glances, clearly enjoying the spectacle. "Why should I help in the kitchen?" Sylvia asked, her tone calm but laced with quiet defiance. "I don't see you asking Emily or Clara to do the same." Mr. Henry's face reddened with anger. He took a step toward her, raising his hand as if to strike. But before he could, Sylvia's mother stepped between them, her eyes filled with silent pleading. "Henry, please," she said softly. Her intervention only seemed to fuel his rage. "You're just as useless as she is," he snapped, his voice venomous. "Both of you, nothing but a burden." Sylvia's mother flinched but held her ground, her love for her daughter stronger than her fear of her husband. At that moment, Sylvia's phone buzzed in her pocket. She stepped back, pulling it out to see a message from one of her sons. "Mom, how's it going? We are on our way. Hang in there." Sylvia stared at the message, her heart swelling with pride and determination. She smiled faintly, knowing that her sons were her strength. Whatever her family threw at her, she would endure for them. As she slid the phone back into her pocket, Sylvia straightened her posture and looked her father in the eye. "You can belittle me all you want," she said quietly, "but I'm not the same girl you sent away. And you'll see that soon enough." The tension in the room was palpable, the air thick with unspoken words. Mr. Henry scoffed and turned away, dismissing her as the rest of the guests returned to their conversations. Sylvia moved to the corner of the room, her grip on the plain brown bag tightening. Her sisters continued to snicker from across the room, but she paid them no mind. She knew the moment of truth would come soon, and when it did, she was ready. The air inside the grand dining hall was thick with anticipation. Mr. Henry sat at the head of the long table, a satisfied smirk on his face as he surveyed the spread of lavish gifts before him. The birthday celebration had turned into a spectacle, with his guests marveling at the opulence displayed by his daughters and their husbands. The table gleamed with expensive wines, watches, and tailored suits, all tokens of the family's supposed success and devotion to him. Sylvia, however, remained an outsider in her father's eyes. She sat at the far end of the table, her presence barely acknowledged. Her gift, a bottle of wine wrapped in plain brown paper, rested awkwardly on the table, standing out like a sore thumb among the gleaming ribbons and gold leaf packaging. Her sisters, Clara and Beatrice, exchanged smirks, their whispers not so quietly mocking Sylvia's cheap offering. Clara leaned over to Beatrice and murmured just loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear, "It's been years, and she's still as poor as ever. I mean, look at that gift. Did she pick it up from a roadside shop?" Beatrice giggled, covering her mouth with a manicured hand. "What did you expect? She walked here. On foot." She made a dramatic show of shivering. "I can't imagine what her life must be like. No car, no husband, and clearly no money." Sylvia, seated quietly with her hands folded in her lap, ignored their comments. She had endured far worse, and their words couldn't pierce the armor she'd built over the years. But her sons had taught her something invaluable: she didn't have to justify herself to anyone. Still, when Clara's husband announced he'd brought a scanner to authenticate the wines and their value, Sylvia felt her stomach tighten. It was obvious they intended to humiliate her father. "Let's start with the gifts that actually matter," Clara said, her tone dripping with condescension. She gestured to the scanner, a sleek device that could analyze the label, vintage, and market value of the wines. Her husband took the lead, scanning the first bottle, a rare Bordeaux gifted by Beatrice and her husband. A digital chime confirmed its authenticity, and the device displayed a price tag that made the guests murmur in admiration. Mr. Henry nodded approvingly, visibly pleased. "Impressive," he said, raising his glass. One by one, the wines were scanned, each revealing high market values that bolstered the sisters' confidence. The guests clapped politely, the air buzzing with approval. Finally, it was Sylvia's turn. The plain-wrapped bottle was placed on the table, eliciting a round of suppressed snickers from Clara and Beatrice. "Shall we skip this one?" Beatrice suggested, feigning concern. "I'm afraid the scanner might not recognize generic brands." Sylvia's face remained composed, though her heart pounded. "Go ahead," she said softly, her voice steady. "Scan it." The room fell silent as the device was placed against the bottle. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the scanner beeped, its display lighting up with information. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "This can't be right," Clara's husband stammered, peering at the screen. He adjusted the scanner and tried again. The result was the same. The wine was an exceptionally rare vintage from a world-renowned winery, valued at a staggering amount far exceeding the other gifts. The room erupted into murmurs of disbelief. "Impossible!" Clara exclaimed, her face a mix of shock and indignation. "How could she?" Beatrice, equally flustered, added, "It must be a mistake. There's no way she could afford something like this." Mr. Henry's eyes widened as he leaned forward, studying the scanner's display. For the first time that evening, he looked at Sylvia, not with contempt, but with genuine curiosity. "Where did you get this?" he demanded, his voice low but commanding. Sylvia stood, her posture elegant and unyielding. "It was a gift from my sons," she said calmly. "They thought it would make you happy." The weight of her words hung in the air. For the first time, the guests turned their attention fully to Sylvia. Her calm demeanor, her quiet strength, and the obvious love her sons had for her painted a picture that contrasted starkly with the narrative her family had perpetuated. Clara and Beatrice were visibly uncomfortable, their earlier mockery now a source of embarrassment. The sisters exchanged nervous glances, their smugness evaporating. Mr. Henry, still holding the bottle, looked at Sylvia with an expression that was difficult to read. His pride and ego clashed with a flicker of guilt and perhaps the trace of admiration. Sylvia met his gaze, her expression neither defiant nor submissive. She had nothing to prove to him or anyone else. As the murmurs around the table died down, one of the guests spoke up. "It seems your daughter has done quite well for herself, Mr. Henry. You must be very proud." The comment hung in the air like a challenge, forcing Mr. Henry to confront the reality of the situation. But before he could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps drew everyone's attention. Sylvia's three sons entered the room, their confident strides commanding the attention of everyone present. They were impeccably dressed, their demeanor polite yet self-assured. "Grandfather," Daniel said, addressing Mr. Henry directly. "I hope the wine is to your liking. We chose it with care." The room went silent. All eyes were on Mr. Henry as he struggled to process the magnitude of what had just unfolded. The tide had shifted. The narrative was no longer about Sylvia's perceived failures but about her undeniable strength and the remarkable legacy she had built against all odds. Let's meet in part 4 of the story as we finally call it a wrap right on this channel. Meanwhile, did you enjoy the story? I hope so. Please like and share the video, drop your comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Turn on the notification bell for more enchanting tales like this one. Thanks for watching and see you on the next.